I was born with a memory of a horse. Didn't matter what kind it was. I had a multitude of different types.
Did
I
you?
had half Arabs, I had Palominos, I had you name it. I had well, let's see. After the half Arabs, I kind of got into Morgans. I had ponies, both
So-
Welch, Hackney, and Shetland.
Did you live on a farm? Did your
Right
parents
here.
farm? Oh, all right. So this has always been your home?
Since 1966. I moved here December of 1966.
When you were a young girl, did you live on a farm there? Or did your
No.
parents have horses?
No.
Or
I just went to stables and rode and did what I could do, but it was here when I actually started horses full time.
so you were kind of one of those girls that when you were growing up, you were just horse crazy.
Right, right, exactly.
And would you do, when you went to stables and riding, would you do lessons, or were you just
No,
kind of?
I didn't start taking lessons till I took from Ellen. And I learned on Old Mo. And I took up there, well, for a couple of years anyway. And I probably would have taken earlier. But unfortunately, my dad died when he was 41, and my mother let her out like this all the time. So she wasn't exactly horse crazy. They were fine to get her to and from school when she was younger, but as far as a horse for a pleasurable thing, they weren't. They were a work animal. So I pretty well when I became an adult, went into it on my own.
Got it.
You know, it took me a couple of jobs to get to where I could afford to even think about lessons. And I started putting some aside and finally bought this place.
So this has always kind of been your dream to have.
This, I said when I was a youngster that what I wanted to have was a horse farm. Here I have. And I've never regretted a minute of it. Peggy and I just had like ideals, I think. And of course I watched all our kids grow up when I was working down the bowling alley, and we'd go back and forth a lot, and you know, we just became friends, and then we became horse friends. And I know she has often said she's never been sorry a minute that she sold me the two that
What
I
is
bought.
Valecho? Where does that name come from?
Well, I wanted to register the farm with the state as Echo Valley, but there were too many so close to it, so I moved a letter here and there and came up with Valecho.
This is a tough question to ask, and that's whether, out of all of the Morgans that you've had, was there one that you had a really significant connection with over any of the others?
Rosie, I would say. Only because when it came time for Rosie to die, she did not die in the fire. She tried to eat her last meal with her head on my lap. And she gave me all the devotion that any horse could ever give a horse, a human being. We literally had to bring her out of the stall and tell her it was all right to die. Oh, she was a fun horse. Kind of a character in her own right. At the time, I lived down here in Marietta, and I lived right next door to the church. And I remember one day, she was out in the pasture with my two ponies at that time, and it was summer. The window was open in the church, and she stuck her head in the window and let out a nice big whinny, upon which the minister informed me, or asked me if I would please leave her in during church.
So she wanted to contribute.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she wanted to make sure she got to where she did.
That's something. So she sounds like she was kind of a people horse.
She was very much a people horse. She was just a sweetheart. I ended up convincing Peggy that I thought I ought to have it. And she finally, I don't know whether it was a money crunch or what, or if she had something in mind, but I bought him as a 2-year-old. And she may have been right, because I had him signed up for Alpo every other week. He was on the auction block more times than any horse should ever be on any auction block. Mental auction block. He and I had several go-rounds. But he was the world's best babysitter. He should have been a girl. When Nuffy was born, he stood over her. Rosie went off and ate. When Sherry was born, Rosie went off and ate. Itchy stayed by her side, stood while she was sleeping. When Rosie'd have a contraction, Itchy'd have a contraction. He was awful. He'd been around the stalls, he'd do everything the mares were doing. He went through labor. But he was an awful good horse.
So he loved his babies. He was
the
yes. herd sire, and it was his.
Well, I had him neutered by then, but because I knew he wasn't going to make a good enough sire. I'm not one of these who has them just because I think they're going to. Either they do or they don't. So he was 3 when I neutered him, and we did pretty well in the show ring. Everybody in the Morgan Association thought I was absolutely crazy, that it was all me, not him, until Barb Hart, who her husband ran the Syracuse International, and we were at Northampton. I had to pull Itchy in and pull Missy out because Missy had a blind splint, came up lame, and all the classes that she could go in, he could go in, being a gelding.
Was Missy even missed
Easter
Candy?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So Barb had a youngster, well, he was a young man at that point, under her wing that she tuteled. And I asked him, I said, Dave, you've always wanted to ride Itchy. Do you want to ride Itchy at the show? And he said, yeah. So I thought the groom's class is a good place to put him, because I knew just what Itchy was going to do. He always, second way of the ring, you come down to the walk, and you pick up the canter, he'd stand right up in midair, and he'd go about 20 feet on his hind legs. And you could almost count on it. In fact, you could count on it. And Barb had been on my back about all Itchy's problems were me. So I said, okay, I've had about enough. So I'll put Dave on him. Dave's supposed to be such a good rider. We'll see what Dave can do. So Dave rode him around the track before his class. It was perfect. Came time for the class, and I saw it building up. And I knew it was blowing. Well, come canter second way in the ring, and Itchy let him have it. I mean, when Dave came out, his hands were bleeding. He had such a tight hold on those reins. And what you don't do is grab the reins. That's the first thing you don't do. When he came out of that ring, he said to Barb, Barb, I don't ever want to hear another word about Judy and Itchy. It is not Judy. Why she has stayed on him all these years is what's worrying me. Because I won't ever get on him again.
So he was a horse that was just really full of himself.
Oh, yeah. He loved himself immensely. And yet you could put Sue Evans' 2-year-old on, put him out there in the indoor ring with nobody holding him, and he, that little kid, around that ring, just as if he were on a rope. He was such a good horse to teach people on. If you didn't know anything, he had a regular schedule of the way he would teach people how to ride. If they're brand new and they've never been on a horse before, okay, you got to get me into motion somehow. Well, okay, now you got me under motion. Now you got to learn how to steer, because I'm not going to go anywhere unless you steer. Well, after we get to that, then you got to get me over to the rail. All right, we master that. All right, now it's time to trot, if you can make me. And he'd do this all the way to a finished product. He was absolutely super as a school horse.
So he was just a really intelligent Morgan.
Yes, he was.
That kind of knew, I'm going to take care of people, but I kind of have to do things my own way if I'm with an
That's right.
experienced rider like Judy.
That's right.
That's something. And he was one of the horses.
He died at 35
Yeah.
here on the farm in the fire.
Isn't that amazing?
I showed him at the fairgrounds at 30, and he could have gone another 10 years, I think,
Isn't that
because he was in absolutely perfect health.
Oh.
And was still, he didn't have a white hair on his face. Nothing. Not over his eyebrows, nothing.
That's something. And his personality, if you were to describe his personality.
Oh, he was a loving smooch. That's why they called him Itchy, because you'd go brushing him and he'd fall over if you moved quick. He just got right into the program.
And he was
a good boy.
something to look at, wasn't he?
Yeah. And all his get were pretty much stamped just like he was. Same heads, same everything.
And did you enjoy him for showing, or were you breeding with him at all? Or?
I did some breeding with him, I did some showing with him, and I had fun with him.
He was a beautiful horse. I really like him.
Oh yeah, he was.
I think he was a big smooch too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was kind of an all-around fun horse. He's one you could do everything with. I've got a ton of pictures of him in there. And I didn't breed anything of my own to him, but I had outside mares coming in. They kept telling me about this mare, yearling, and how well bred she was, and they thought she'd make a great show horse, yada yada. In fact, there's a picture of her right over here
All right.
on this wall.
Okay.
They said there's only one thing wrong with her. She's kind of a strange color. Well, I didn't know how strange. Her mother was a liver, but had the light dapples over the liver. I don't know what the father was. And what Missy turned out eventually was a golden buckskin. But when I first bought her as a yearling, she was pink. I mean pink. But they didn't tell me that. They spent my money on her and they didn't tell me she was pink. But she was very pink. Sure enough was by Flair of Dick and Ellen's, and she was a great horse as long as you didn't do a sit and trot to her, because she was like riding a cotton picking cob. She did not do a sitting trot well. At the time, I was taking riding lessons here at the house from Naomi Bahuniak. And in fact, Naomi taught me here for 20 years. And even she said, you may have to do the sitting trot for a very short time. Only because it was in the curriculum, you know.
Right.
But she did have slightly a rough gait, but her problem was she had a great deal of thrust from the back end, and she could move. She was built for speed.
Kind of a roadster horse,
Yes.
maybe?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
The faster she went, the better she liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And she rarely broke out of a trot.
Yeah. So she was a fun one.
Oh, yeah.
She was a lot of fun. Did
She
you?
was my first Valecho foal, yeah.
Valecho. All right.
High over Bell Pepper. In fact, I do believe he came before even Miss Easter Candy.
And where did he come from? He was a stud.
Same place in New Hampshire. He was the weanling when I bought him. I gave him to the Connecticut Governor's Horse Guard because I had furnished them with tack and blankets and all kinds of stuff. Every Christmas I'd buy them blankets for their horses as well as for Pepper and all this sort of stuff. And then came along Sherry, who was Nuffy's daughter.
And was Sherry out of
Crusader.
Oldwick Crusader?
Right.
Oh, I bet you had a motor on that one then.
Oh, yes.
Tell me about Sherry.
Oh, Sherry was a sweetheart. Sherry was the only horse that I know of that could go all phases without changing her shoes. Pick her up a little bit, park, put her down a little bit, pleasure. It's before, of course, this was before the Classic came into being. I don't know where they're going now, because what's left after Classic? Roadster, oh, you bet. A roadster we got. The only thing she wouldn't do is go western.
Yeah. She just had too much attitude.
No, you could not pull her together to go western. But any other jump,
My goodness.
she loved to do it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was really a versatile.
Dressage, we fiddled around with that here. She'd do anything you ask out of her. Fantastic driving horse. But anything slower than fast pleasure.
She just was full of life.
And yet she had a pretty good show record.
She.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, she showed in Park and Pleasure.
That's fantastic.
And Roadster.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Those kind of horses are a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Because there's nothing like riding on a horse that just really wants to give it to you and go.
Oh yeah. If you didn't go fast enough, she'd stand right straight up in the air. I mean, if you weren't ready when she was ready, your name was grass right then and there.
Now, was she somebody that you were responsible, that you showed and that you handled kind of start to finish? Or
I started her.
Comes to you. And that was a Ruth Cross horse?
Right.
Yeah, so how did you meet Ruth Cross? And that was kind of the beginning of a really positive relationship,
Oh yeah.
right?
Well, I had seen, you know, how you talk to people even though you don't know them in the show ring specifically. And we had become good friends. And she was living over in Auburn Center. Jordan asked me to come over one day, so I went over. And I knew right where she lived, so there was no problem there. Saw Sabby as a young up-and-coming stud. Well, it seems as how Ruth, every once in a while, would need a little money. She let me buy Sab. And now there was a great horse. He would do anything you wanted him to, but he wasn't as much of a fun horse, say, as Donnie. But he was a good horse. I know when Sue Evans had Dylan, of course Sue was boarding here at the time, comes home from the hospital, doesn't even go to her house, right to the barn, plumps this little bitty right up on his back and says, "Bond." And they did. And when Haley came home from the hospital, same thing, "Bond."
So he was, along comes the horse that kind of has the looks, has the great temperament, is great around the people. So he was kind of the whole package.
Oh yeah,
there wasn't anything about him that...
Oh no, everybody loves Sam. He was well-mannered. You could take him in and out of the barn, he wouldn't holler. He didn't care who was next to him, whether it was a male or a female, or none of that bothered him. And yet he was a good breeding stud. It's just that Sabby happened to come along at a time when there wasn't a whole lot of breeding being done right around here in the 70s and early 80s. So, they were starting to drift away to the great big money-making studs. So I just kept Sab around for the heck of it. And we'd ride him and drive him and fool around with him and have a good time with him.
Something. Now I think I printed off his, let me see, yeah I did. He had some nice foals, and he also, I see that the Schnooks bred to him. And
oh yeah, they bred
Robin Allen.
They bred more than one mare to him.
C&B Spellbound was either the Schnooks, or that would have been Cindy Fox. Would have bred, and then also Ann Knoll bred to him.
Yeah, she bred to him twice.
So, if you were to describe him, what would you say? I mean, was he really typey, Morgan? Was he black? Was he
whole black as pitch?
He was really something to look at.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you ever show him at all?
Yes.
Or all right, and how did you? What
We
division?
did very well.
Okay.
That ruined me. I still, and the woman who takes care of me during the week, she comes in 4 mornings a week. She went down to the barn one day, and she felt the presence of my horses down there. And I do all the time. I hear them kicking in the night, when they roll over and stuff. I still hear them.
Right.
And I probably always will.
Did you ever have any horses after the fire, or was that the end of it?
That was it.
It's a terrible experience to have to go through.
Well, I lost 9, and 3 boarders besides.
Yeah.
Probably I feel the worst about the boarders. 2 of them were Morgans. I'm still good friends with the woman who owned them. In fact, her two kids are considered my grandkids. Sue Evans and Haley and Dylan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're my grandkids.